Alrighty, welcome everybody to our 17th episode of Brownsville Tech Live, and we've got a special guest in the house tonight. His name is Mr. City Commissioner Roy de los Santos. Welcome, Commissioner.
Hello, Daniel. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for being on our show. We've actually made it into 17 episodes.
Congratulations.
Yeah, we're hoping to hit the 20th soon here. But
Very good.
one of the things about our show, if you've not seen it before, is we typically talk about technology. We do everything from game reviews to hardware reviews, whether it's laptops or cell phones, computers. We've expanded into solar technology, security systems, video cameras, and things like that. But one of the things that I decided to do is I had recently come across a lot of initiatives that the city recently announced. I think the mayor had put out a few press releases, and I wanted to bring somebody on to talk about a little bit about those things and what they actually mean for the city of Brownsville. And so I reached out to you, and I'm happy to have you on our show, and we hope to have you plenty of more times.
Absolutely.
All right, Mr. D, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Just where you're from. What decided. What made you run a few years ago, and what are the kind of things you're involved in the city before we touch some of the areas we want to talk about?
Sure. So I am one of the freshman commissioners. I was just elected in June of last year. I was sworn in on June 29th, 2021. So I'm still just in my first year on the job as a city commissioner. Born and raised in Brownsville, grew up on Southmost. My dad still lives out there.
Ah,
So my dad was a longshoreman, mom was a secretary, and now works at St. Joseph's Academy locally. I'm a full-time manager with AT&T. I've been with AT&T almost 23 years now, and I'm on the mobility side. I handle the retail store experience for all of our stores nationwide. I'm one of a big team that handles retail store experience nationwide. And what motivated me to run, I had run back in 2007. And what motivated me this time around, though, is once I saw the incumbent was not seeking reelection, uh, the names that were floating around for the race were not people I would want representing me.
yeah.
I wanted to make sure that the citizens had a choice for who would be their representative on the city commission. And I lobbied a good friend of mine very, very hard to try and get him to run. Ultimately, he could not, and I understood why. But once he was not going to do it in the absence of a more qualified candidate, I went ahead and took the plunge, and I'm very glad that I did.
Yeah. Well, we're glad to definitely have you representing us on the city commission. One of the things
Thank
that I think most of us experienced over the last 2 years is isolation and isolation with regards to COVID. And I was kind of in one of those situations where I worked for a government contractor, and I literally had to move 2,000 employees to from a physical workforce into a mobile workforce. And in addition to dealing with other things, our company dealt with infusion centers that we had to set up, and I had to support that technology. But one of the things that came pretty apparent over that time period was the lack of internet capabilities. Now, whether that was because of physical infrastructure not being there or just our citizens not having the cost. My daughter, she goes to BISD, and one of the things that she was offered was one of these hotspots. I think most children got one of these, but the internet was very slow, just really slow. And I mean,
Yep.
luckily we had internet, but she was issued one of these. But a lot of kids out there in our city still don't have that. And I know that in some places the internet's not available.
Mhm.
So the COVID kind of pushed us into looking at those deficiencies or determining that we had some deficiencies. So when this fiber initiative came up, I thought, oh wow! I said it'd be nice. It would have been nice to have had at least that infrastructure to start off with a few years ago. Could you kind of explain a little bit to us about what that fiber initiative is?
Sure. So this is part of the American Rescue Plan funding that came as a result of COVID. And it's a little over $19 million of that money that the city has dedicated to building out approximately 93 miles of fiber network. And what the city will own and build is considered the middle mile. And it is a series of rings, 8 rings throughout the city that'll provide the backbone for a fiber network.
Okay.
And just recently, we started the conversation with the partner lit communities to operate BTX fiber for the last mile, which will be going from the rings that we're building to the actual homes of our residents. And all indications are from the folks that we're dealing with that this will make high-speed internet, and we're talking speeds of at least 100 megs or more, available, and that's symmetrical, available to 100% of the homes within the Brownsville city limit in the next few years
So will the
at an
termination?
affordable price.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, because I was going to ask you. So is this a partnership between public and private, where you're going to have private internet providers provide the termination to the houses?
Correct.
Okay. So will that termination be copper or will it be true fiber?
My understanding is it will be fiber, in some cases Wi-Fi, depending on the areas to start.
Okay.
But that's part of the conversations we've just started with lit communities.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. Well, that definitely would be great because I know that. And by the way, I also was lived on Southmost, and I remember a few years ago when I lived down there. Actually, many years ago when I lived down there, the only thing that we could get at the time was DSL.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time it reached to where I was living at, it wasn't like the fastest DSL.
Yeah, I'm
So
guessing you had about 6 megs, if that.
if I was lucky, you know.
Yeah,
Of course, that was an upgrade to dial-up.
yeah.
You know, it's kind of funny. We can't imagine being on dial-up, but you know, there's a lot of places in the country that I've heard that still are on dial-up, which is kind of
Well,
weird.
I think what was being transmitted back then was a lot more or a lot less intensive with regard to the broadband that it used. So it was easier to be able to operate on just a broadband connection. But in this day and age, you just absolutely can't live without broadband.
No, no. I mean, I think I can't. I don't even know my speed here, but I think I recently upgraded. But I just remember the days, you know, when it was like really slow, really slow. I mean, I remember back when I used to live in Houston. I mean, I used to belong to this computer club, and the whole deal of this computer club was that they had meetings every month somewhere down in downtown, and we as computer geeks we actually traded software and hardware, but you also got access to what they called bulletin board systems, and
Okay.
it's where you could download software and all kinds of stuff. And I think back and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I mean, it took forever to download a video or a graphic or something, you know. Now it's just
Hmm.
split seconds, you know.
If you
But
have a good connection, it's split seconds.
yeah, yeah, definitely, you know. And you know, one of the things that definitely is a plus. Like I said, do you know what that pricing may be to the average citizen? Well, what it
I
could be?
believe, I don't think I've seen the actual pricing for this model. I know when I've looked at other cities that are doing something similar, usually around 39.99 for lower. And then of course there'll be tiered service going all the way up to a gig if it's available.
Yeah.
And but I do know I have received assurances that there are price caps that will be in effect to ensure that it will be affordable to the public. So even though it won't be lit communities that has exclusive rights to it, there will be other providers that can jump in and provide that last mile connection to the home. But there will be a cap on what they're allowed to charge for the service.
Okay.
Because yeah, the
Yeah.
key is not just building the network; it's making it affordable to everyone
Okay.
in the community.
Yeah, because a few years ago, and you know, I was reading, there was a movement for power over broadband, which was Duke Energy or somebody up in Houston, or I can't remember the name of the company, was doing
Hmm.
this test of actually transmitting broadband over the electrical wire, but there was a lot of issues. But the promise
I've
at the
heard of that.
time was that, like in the city of Brownsville, which we have our own utility company. At the time when they were talking about this, doing it in Houston, I thought, gee, that'd be great if PUB could actually do that. I mean, they've got reach to every house for the most part.
Well, no, that's the thing they don't and that was one of the things that came up during the discussion last week with the partner with Lit Communities, and they said, everywhere PUB touches, we're going to touch.
Yeah.
But PUB does not service 100% of Brownsville, because as the
Really?
city limits have continued to expand, it's gone into other areas. So you've got Magic Valley, you've got other providers on the outskirts that are not the Public Utilities Board. They've
Yeah.
got AEP in some areas as well.
Yeah. Now I know that the county judge probably a couple of weeks ago announced that they were doing an initiative with Starlink, which is Elon
Okay.
Musk's. But I don't know if you've heard much about that. I think it was just providing internet service to the county parks or something like that.
I've heard of that, but I know folks that have ordered Starlink, and I think they're still waiting for the service. I don't know if it's up and running yet for public use, or if it's still being tested.
Yeah, they're saying, will fiber reach places outside of Brownsville? Somebody's chimed in.
It can, but I don't think, as it's being built out, and when we're talking about the minimum speeds available, that's always based on the distance from the network, whether it's a central office or what have you, that's providing the speed. So the further out you go, the better the chances are that you won't see that minimum 100 megabits per second.
Mm-hmm.
So it's possible that those providers can piggyback off our network and provide service outside the city limits, but I can't speak to what those speeds will be.
Okay, so it's really going to be confined to the city primarily.
That's the top priority, is
Yeah.
everything within the city limits.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, that sounds great. Will any of the current internet service providers be partners? Spectrum, AT&T, Verizon.
Not likely. I know as an AT&T employee, I can tell you that AT&T usually likes to own the network from start to finish.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that we're involved in a lot of public-private partnerships that look like this, where somebody else owns a big portion of the network and we own the last mile. I know that those are always things we can consider, but it's not my understanding that we put in a bid for it.
Now,
So I think Lit Communities, and they're going to be doing business as BTX Fiber,
okay.
is likely going to be the primary provider going to the home. But again, it'll be a network that's available for other internet service providers to resell on.
So if hypothetically, let's say I've got Spectrum here, will I be able to switch?
That should be, yes, you should be able to switch with no problem. If they're telling me it's 100% of citizens will have access to this, every citizen should have the option to switch.
Okay. And do you know if that's going to be separate billing from anything else, or is it something we're
It
going to
should
pay
be.
on our
If it's
city
BTX
taxes?
fiber, since it's BTX fiber and it goes beyond the PUB boundaries,
Uh-huh.
my expectation is that it's going to be a separate bill from BTX fiber.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay.
And again, that's just my expectation. That's not set in stone.
So is the Wi-Fi going to be in a as a choice, or is the Wi-Fi going to be servicing certain areas where you can't reach, where fiber can't be installed, or
My understanding was Wi-Fi would be the option to some areas initially as the network continues to get built out.
okay.
But the key is still about getting that 100 megabits per second speed.
Okay.
So whether they're achieving that with fiber or with Wi-Fi is not my largest concern. My concern is 100 megs per household citywide.
Okay. All right. Yeah, because I mean, one of the things now is when I've got to pull to the side for Wi-Fi, I've got to either go to a McDonald's or go to
Right.
the library or somewhere. I mean, not that I'm there, but I'm saying I've had situations where I've had to pull over, and I can't always rely on my phone. So,
Mhm.
I was wondering about the Wi-Fi. Um, so then you're saying most of the areas in the city then will be covered under this.
They are telling us every area of the city will be covered.
Okay.
And I know that sounds really ambitious. So I'm slightly skeptical, but I'm optimistic.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, one of the other things I wanted to just touch base a little bit, and this is off topic. I just thought about it, but I know that you work in the industry and you're free to answer or not. But and we haven't heard a lot about it, but I was reading about the fact that a lot of the providers, the ISPs, not the ISP, but the wireless carriers, are shutting down 3G. But
Hmm.
there was an article that I was reading about 2 days ago, which was kind of scary. I know that AT&T's already shut down the 3Gs. Verizon has pushed it out till July. But one of the things that was really scary was that there was still a lot of devices, non-cellular phone devices out there, um, that are still on 3G. For example, medical alert devices. Those apparently are
Hmm.
still in 3G. A lot of alarm systems, home alarm systems, are still in 3G. And surprisingly, there's some cars still out there that some of their onboard systems, like the anti-collision alert systems and stuff like that, are still running on 3G. Uh, do you know if there's going to be any delays with regards to that, especially like some of those medical devices, especially the older folks out there, who depend on these devices. If they fall, they're not going to have service. In fact, about a month ago, my security alarm system company said you need to change out the panel and everything else because they're shutting 3G completely down. I don't know what's
Hmm.
going to happen to 4G, but a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people don't know that their alarm systems and some of their cars. There's actually one car manufacturer, I think it was Subaru, that doesn't even have an upgrade yet for some of the vehicles. So, have you heard
Oh,
anything
wow.
about that?
I have not heard anything about further delays related to that. It wouldn't surprise me if that comes to pass, if we've still got that much line out there on 3G. But I really do think it's incumbent on all of those companies that use technology that they continue to evolve,
Yeah.
because the demand for broadband use is only going to continue to grow as we see homes become smarter, more devices in the homes being controlled digitally.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got to keep up with those advances, and that
Yeah.
goes for everybody. I know with AT&T, for those customers who had a 3G device, one day there was a brand new phone that showed up on my doorstep, and I'm like, "What's this?" And when I started looking into it, it's one of the handsets I have on my account was a 3G device. It wasn't compatible,
Wow.
and since it was getting shut down, they sent me a free phone.
Wow.
So
Yeah,
that
I
right
was
there
very
is good customer
surprised. I didn't
service. So yeah, those
realize that.
medical alert, home alarms, and whether it's upgrading a panel or upgrading devices, they need to make sure they're taking care of their customers. If they want to continue to have them paying those monthly fees for the services,
Right.
this is part
Right.
of it.
I was just very surprised, especially with the cars. I couldn't believe. I think it was Subaru that I was reading. They don't have any upgrades for some of those vehicles, and we're not talking like clunker cars like from the '90s or even God forbid anybody driving an '80s car still. But you know what I'm saying? These were
Yep.
cars manufactured up to 2021. It was like
Mm-hmm.
wow. I didn't realize that the problem was pretty serious.
No, but
Uh,
think about it. How long has 4G been around now? Because we're already getting into LTE and 5G,
yeah,
and they had not evolved yet,
yeah.
despite the fact that 4G has been out there for quite some time. So that may be a little short-sightedness on their part.
Yeah, yeah. It was just amazing. I just couldn't believe it. It was like, wow, if grandma or grandpa, falls over and they can't get up, no pun intended. That was the commercial. That was the
No, I would
commercial.
really think, especially with the medical devices, I can't imagine those providers don't have a plan to upgrade.
I would think so. I
Yeah.
would hope so. you
Mhm.
know,
I mean, if
but
they don't, then I think they're opening themselves up to potential liability
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and to
Is
lose customers.
is our airport going to be affected in any way by this concern about 5G and the antennas being so close, or are we going to be okay?
I don't know. That's a great question because I have heard some of the concerns and how different airlines were asking for delays in the launch and the switch over to 5G. I've not heard anything specific to the Brownsville airport. I'll have to reach out to those folks and see if we're experiencing any problems.
Yeah, because I think one of the settlements that the carriers had with the government was that they had promised not to put an antenna like within 2 miles of an airport.
Of an airport.
Yeah. But I had actually one of my co-hosts. He's our Apple expert, and he used to work for Boeing. And he quite doesn't buy the story about the altimeter problems. He says, we've been flying planes without computers since the '60s.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know. I mean, I don't know how true it is or how serious it is, but for a long time we couldn't even turn on our cell phones, in mid-flight, for a
Yep.
long time. I think we can now. It's been a while since I've flown, but you just never know. I as a passenger wouldn't want to take that risk though.
I don't blame you, Power Passenger.
I mean, it's bad enough. Boeing has gotten beat up over the last couple of years. Because of a software glitch in their systems that actually controlled that sensor that caused those two airplane crashes. So,
Yeah.
it was a matter of software, and I mean, as a programmer, I can tell you that a comma here and a comma there can cause quite a big of a stir.
I'm sure.
So it doesn't take a whole lot. So I just hope that at least for some of these folks, especially with those 3G concerns, that at least they're able to have operable medical devices. I know that I have a Toyota, and I always complain about the anti-collision sensor that I have, because that I'm telling you, that thing, it's one of those cars that if I've got it on auto cruise control, it
Uh-huh.
literally senses the vehicle in front of me. And if, let's say, I'm traveling to San Antonio and I put the cruise control at 70, that sensor is constantly checking the front to see if a vehicle, and if it sees a vehicle, it'll automatically slow down with me without me slowing. But then once
Nice.
the vehicle clears, it takes off. It actually does it by itself. My wife goes crazy because she says, "Take that thing off," because the car takes control of the vehicle, the
Yep. It's
acceleration.
trying to get
So
back to that speed that you had set at.
exactly, that's what it's trying to
Wow.
do as quick as possible. So, I as much as I complain about them, but there's if those things aren't working, somebody may be depending on an anti-collision system and find out that it's got a 3G modem inside. So, so we've just become very dependent on technology. That's the deal.
Absolutely.
You know. So let's talk a little bit. A few weeks ago, I had a friend of mine. He's a very good friend of mine. We've actually went to school all the way to kindergarten, and he's in the solar panel business. And had him on to talk about solar panels. There has been a lot of confusion. I know that I've been
Mhm.
confused with regards to solar panels. A lot of places around the city, there's a company, I think Solar Pro and a few others, that have been kind of marketing themselves as an alternative to PUB. And I know that my neighbor's got some solar panels right next door, and I've got a neighbor a few houses down that do. And I know there's a large investment. But one of the things that the mayor talked about a few weeks ago was a neighborhood called Habitat Zero. And
Yes.
I wanted to kind of get a little bit more information with regards to Habitat Zero and what's that about.
So that is, I believe it's pronounced Astria, and it's a planned community that's just been approved for Brownsville. The idea is it's sustainable, and it's something that can be suited to whether it's here on Earth or on Mars. And that's the
Okay.
idea is having housing, sustainable housing that works for us anywhere and that's easy to put together. So this is a community, I believe it's 125 homes. They're set to build off of Boca Chica Boulevard between now and the end of the year. Because as I understand it, there will be units available at the start of 2023. They've got 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units that they're designing. And there is the website that has a little video that tells you all about it, shows you the different floor plans, goes through the pricing. I did see where there's buttons to click on request to rent, but also request to buy. I
Wow.
don't know that they're going to be selling units, but there is an option there to put in a request if you want to purchase one. The pricing is a little on the high end for Brownsville. I think the 1 bedroom start at $1,200 a month. and the 3 bedrooms go up to $1,500 a month. No, I take that back. And the 3 bedrooms are $2,200 a month. They're 1,500 square feet. But it's solar panels everywhere. So it's solar energy, Tesla battery walls so that energy can be stored. There are electric car charging stations throughout the neighborhood because it's assumed that most of the people who live there will have electric cars. High efficiency design for the homes as far as the materials, the amount of energy that they use, and the amount of water that they use. Same thing with the landscaping, minimal use on water so that everything is sustainable and has as little impact as possible on the environment.
And are these going to be like
what's
duplexes?
most interesting is that as these are, they're I guess it's prefab most of the components, but once the components are on site, it takes about a week to build a home.
Wow.
Yeah.
Versus 3 to 4 months through a normal
Yep.
house. Wow. So, are these like duplexes, or are they going to be standalone units?
They look like standalone units from the designs that I saw.
Okay. Wow.
If you go to, I believe it's astria.com. Let me.
Yeah, I haven't actually been on the website. I did have a picture somewhere. Let me see if I can bring that picture up. Let me switch over to our virtual theater. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but we have a virtual theater. No popcorn, of course.
Nice.
Let's see.
I assume, especially as a techie, you must have seen a few episodes of Mystery Science Theater 3000.
No, actually not.
Oh my God, you haven't seen that?
No, I haven't seen
You
that.
have got to check that out.
Let me see if I can pull up the
setting sort of like this, where it's a movie theater and it's very dark, and I think it's a couple of robots and one human.
Yeah.
But they're like in a theater and they're watching these old movies from probably the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s.
Oh,
and
wow.
They're critiquing movies as they're on the screen, and it's just hilarious.
Let me.
I'll have to look it up on YouTube for some highlight clips.
Yeah, so I couldn't crop this picture, so pardon me for overlapping the theater there, but this is the picture that I saw. Now, where exactly on Boca Chica is this?
Oh, I don't actually recall. Let me see if it's got the location on here. Oh yeah, here it is. So we're looking at, it looks like it's just east of the airport.
East of the airport.
Can you pull up a website?
I don't have the screen for it right now.
Okay.
Yeah, east of the airport would be towards California Road, or this way?
Probably.
Not sure. Huh. Wow. So what's the target demographic for this neighborhood? Do you know? Is it going to be millennials, 30, 40?
I would think it's folks who are conscious about the environment and wanting that type of a lifestyle where you're independent from most of the electrical grid and sustainable usage, and who can afford that price range.
Wow.
I don't know that I would say specifically millennials because I think we've got folks that are that conscious across different generations.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there could be a wide range that we see in there.
Wow. Let's see.
Yeah, I expect we'll see some Gen Xers in there even.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe a retirement home for me. I'm a Gen Xer. Down the road. Not right now.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, let's see. Well, that's the press release for the fiber, right? Let's see here, and then we've got the press release here that the mayor put out for the Habitat Zero.
Yeah, I did send you the link to the Astria site with the Habitat Zero information, and on there you'll see the map of exactly where it is along Boca Chica. And it'll show you everything, including the floor plans, different pictures, the prices.
Now, somebody's asking here, give me a second. 511 Highway. Huh? Oh, yeah, that's right. 511 does intersect with Boca Chica at some point. No, it's not 511. 511
Uh,
heads towards the port, and then it goes to Boca Chica. But I don't think that's 511, is it?
Here, let me look at my map on my iPhone compared to what I'm seeing on the screen on the Astria site. So Boca Chica. Where are we? Okay, there's four. There's the airport.
So is there electrical going to be like some of these companies that right now are installing, where they're saying uh, that you won't have an electric bill, but there will be because you're going to be selling most of your electricity back to PUB's grid. Now, on occasion, when there's cloudy days or stormy days, will that be the same thing for this neighborhood?
I don't know that it'll be to the same extent, only because with the Tesla battery packs, I think there will be a lot of energy that's stored on site.
Okay.
So I don't know that as much surplus energy will go back to the PUB grid as you see with other homes.
Yeah.
That aren't set up with as much storage.
Yeah.
Yeah, they may be right. I guess 511 was it Indiana Avenue in this area?
Yeah. Because
Yeah,
I think 511
right
turns to
there.
Indiana.
Very near it.
Wow. Wow, that's going to be kind of interesting to see how that goes. I know that over on 511, I could have sworn that over there by 511 there was some. There's a neighborhood right in front of Hugh Emerson, and I could have sworn I saw tiny houses in there. That's another trend happening quite a bit.
Yeah.
You know, tiny houses. I mean, I personally couldn't live in one, but a lot of people do like those types of homes. You know,
I think my biggest concern with a tiny home would be the bathroom and the shower. I don't want I don't want like an airplane bathroom or shower in a tiny home. I want still full size. But as far as the other living space, I could totally see spending more time outdoors. If I've got my TV and a comfortable chair or love seat and a good sized bed, good sized bathroom, I'd be a happy man.
Well, you know, one of the things that I talked about in my solar energy episode was the misconception out there, and I don't think my friend who's a solar guy argued with me, is this misconception about PUB's rates. I did some research prior to that episode, and it became pretty prevalent to me that PUB's pretty comparable. They're around 11 cents a kilowatt.
Oh yeah, they're very competitive. In fact, if you're looking valley wide and who the different providers are, we're probably among the most affordable.
Yeah.
We're not the cheapest by any means, but we're nowhere near the most expensive.
Yeah.
We're very competitive. I know I was looking at that, I think just last week, looking at our rates.
And I know that, you know, there was a lot of controversy after the freeze, you know, with ERCOT, you know, and specifically, you know, the blackouts. And I know there's a local faction within our city that talks about Tenasca. But it was my understanding that the energy is actually cheaper to purchase elsewhere than actually generating it yourself. Is that true? I mean,
I think it depends on how you're generating energy. And so, because if you're, you know, if you're trying to use a fuel-fired plant versus a coal-fired plant versus a nuclear plant, you know, the cost of production is going to fluctuate. Mm-hmm. So I think it depends on who you're buying from and how you're producing yourself, whether or not that's true. And it may have been also that, so I know we did see a big windfall from the city perspective of the surplus energy we were able to sell on the open market during the winter storm. Mm-hmm. And it was something like an extra $100 million that PUB brought in that had not been originally budgeted. And since the city benefits 10% of the revenues that PUB generates, that was an extra $10 million plus for the city of Brownsville in fund transfers from PUB last year.
Yeah, because I know some people argue, well, you know, we should have a choice, but I'm not sure about their argument whether it's valid, because I think they're under the impression that PUB is expensive. But like I said, when I did the research, PUB was actually lower than some of the other so-called choice providers. And then
The
the other
biggest
thing, of
thing to
course,
keep in
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing to keep in mind is during that winter storm, I remember all of the news stories afterwards about folks who had independent providers, but at a fluctuating rate. And
Mm-hmm.
they saw some outrageously high electric bills
Mm-hmm.
following that winter storm because the rates were jacked way up. And we did not suffer that as a result, if you're a customer of PUB. So we
Yeah.
were well insulated on that front. So
And the other
I
thing I
understand
argue
people's
with
concern.
some of my friends that talk about this is I said, well, you're not considering that when you get a PUB bill, you're getting electricity, you're getting water, and you're getting garbage services. You're
Yep,
getting those bills separately if you're on Magic Valley and you live out in the boonies somewhere in the county.
exactly.
So
That's right.
if you calculate those costs, add them to your Magic Valley bill, you're going to find out that it's probably comparable or maybe a
Hmm.
little higher, you know.
Absolutely.
And so that was one of the things that, I was telling even my solar energy friend was that I said, the argument that PUB is actually higher is not true. It is a
Right.
false perception.
Hmm.
But if you don't do the research, you won't know.
Exactly.
If so I was wondering about that with regards to that, because since we're talking about solar energy, one of the things that I know my friend mentioned was that the energy, whatever excess energy there was, would be actually sold back to the grid, and in turn you would get a credit. I guess it's like reverse metering or something like that. So,
And that's the way it should work. And I think that's something that should be highly encouraged. My hope and vision for the future of Brownsville is that we become less dependent on having to buy energy from outside. We
mm-hmm.
should be able to support ourselves. If ever there's a winter freeze like that again, I want to know that we can generate the power to take care of our people and our citizens first,
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully have a surplus that we can then sell on the open market and continue to benefit from financially. But to be in the position we were where we had to force these blackouts because there was not enough electricity to go around, that's a problem.
Yeah. And I guess the question is, would have, let's say hypothetically, the plant had been built, would have it really helped in this situation based on the weather conditions and stuff like that? I
I
mean,
don't know enough about that plant, what the plans were for it, to be able to answer that. That's a great question, but I could not say if it's a plant that would have been able to weather the weather conditions well enough to stay in full operation.
yeah,
And then of course there's the ERCOT factor, and would regulations at the state level, if PUB was just a partner in this plant, we didn't own the plant outright, then would ERCOT regulations kick in that say, well, yeah, you're a minority owner in the plant, but we still govern where this power goes first. And we're prioritizing it in other parts of the state, and there's still forcing the rolling blackouts. I don't know what the impact would have been had the Tenasca plant been built.
yeah. Because there's a few people that like to rattle the natives locally, and that's one of the
Yep.
things you hear over and over and over. And I'm sitting here, just my blood pressure's going up because I'm saying no, 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 no.
Well, and the city makes it easy for them to beat that drum
Yeah,
because there has not been, in my opinion, there has not been enough either transparency or enough communication and education
yeah,
about what the outcome was, what happened, where the monies have gone. But my understanding is we should have the results of the audit sometime in mid-May.
yeah.
And I know that's been a long time coming, but I continue to check up on it, and I continue to be reassured that everything is proceeding on schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So I expect that in the next 60 days or less, we
Yeah.
should have answers.
Now, one other area that I didn't plan to talk about, and I know you and I didn't speak about talking about this, but it is recent news, and it does involve technology, and it does involve PUB, is the Russian hack. I will tell you that I had a surprise text this morning from PUB saying that I owed them $900. Yeah. And what it turned
Interesting.
out was I called PUB. I was on there for about an hour waiting for somebody to answer. I think they've been pretty busy. But what the deal was that I made a payment early last month, and then I made a payment on the 15th.
Hmm.
Well, apparently the payment was for $400, but it wasn't reflected on my bill that was just released last night. So when I called PUB this morning, they said, "Oh, sir, we've been having issues with Invoice Cloud, where we're seeing delays in payments, and we've had lots of customers being affected by that," which brings to the question of technology, because nobody's been pretty clear about this. Was the hacking to an internal PUB system, or was it to Invoice Cloud, which has caused all these problems with all these billings? Do you know anything about that?
I don't know firsthand. I know I had heard about the attack. We were notified right after it was discovered that Sunday by PUB, and I was very pleased to have gotten that notice and heard about it from PUB directly before hearing it from the blogs. But no, I can't say whether it's not my impression that it was to Invoice Cloud. My impression was that it was PUB systems. I just don't know to the extent which systems and to what extent they were compromised.
Because I can tell you
that assessment.
I can tell you firsthand that I have dealt with, because I think what the virus was a ransomware virus, which basically what happens is the whatever files you have on a system are encrypted, and then these hackers either put a notice on your server, or they'll send you an email saying, "I want X amount of dollars in Bitcoin if you want the private key," because there's two keys. There's a private key and a public key. You've got the public key, but you don't have the private key to do the encryption. And I've actually had to deal with ransomware before with some of the other companies that I've dealt with, and I can tell you from my experience, it's usually a Windows server somewhere out at the front of the network that usually is affected. And so the question was there really truly customer data affected? Customer data? Like in my case, I have my credit cards and my bank account information, or was it Invoice Cloud? That's the confusion,
Right. And I don't know that we've received confirmation on that, if any customer information was compromised. I know I'm keeping an eye on my data because I am a PUB customer, so I'm watching transactions on my accounts. And just today I was going through my phone bill and looking at devices I have on my mobile account, and is there anything that's been activated without my permission recently? But no, everything looked legit. Yeah. But when we talk about Invoice Cloud, I will say one of the things I noticed that was curious today, I got an email about my current PUB bill.
Yeah.
And usually I get a text message first.
Yeah.
And I was surprised that didn't happen. And then when I look back at the previous month, it's probably been about 45 days since the last one. And usually every 30 days, I'd get the notice that there's a new invoice, reply okay to pay your bill online or via text message. And I always do that. And this time it was delayed a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I think my bill's due next week or late this week.
Yeah.
And so I'm just hearing about it today versus 2 weeks in advance like I usually do. So that could be part of that impact.
Do you know if we're still going to remain with Invoice Cloud?
I do not know. That's a good question.
The reason I'm asking is because
a completely independent animal.
With this panicia that started this morning over my $900 PUB bill, I went over to Invoice Cloud and I said, no, I don't owe $900. So I made a payment on Invoice Cloud, not for $900, but my PUB bill was going to be due in like 3 days, and so I made a payment. Well, I made the payment, and usually it takes about a minute, maybe 2 minutes to see it on the main account summary page. Nothing. I don't see it. I see it. I said, oh no. What if they shut down Invoice Cloud? I just made a payment. Then the meter guy's going to be here tomorrow to shut my electricity. And so I called. That's why I called. And that's when she told me they were doing a delay. But what I also noticed on the website, in addition to, there's a section where you go in, it's a pull-down menu, you click on it to pay, online payment, it takes you to Invoice Cloud. But then there was another section at the front end of the website that also said pay. I clicked on it, and that didn't look like Invoice Cloud, so I thought, well, maybe they got rid of Invoice Cloud, now there's some other company, dealing with this. It was confusing to me, so.
Yeah, that's something I'm going to have to ask about.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just, it's something we didn't talk about, but I know that, there's been a lot of chatter about, the customer data and so forth.
Hmm.
But like I said, I just wasn't sure whether that was an actual internal PUB system or whether it had been invoice cloud. You know,
Yeah,
so
good
the
question.
last thing I wanted to talk about was, let me flip on my slide here on the virtual theater. Let me is recently the city of Brownsville was named a winner by International Data Corporation, and I believe that Miss Helen Ramirez is going to be up there the next few days to accept the award on behalf of the city, or at least that's what the IDC website mentioned. Could you tell us a little bit about this award and how we came about to earn it?
Yeah, so this is this week in Columbus, Ohio, the 4th through the 7th of April. So she should be up there already. And this award, as I understand it, is based on the plans we have in place and are moving forward on to bring accessible or the accessibility to 100% of our citizens for broadband. So this isn't for anything that we've done already as far as building out the network. This is for all of the groundwork that has been laid as far as the plan, the commitment of the funding, what the goal is, and what the finished product is intended to look like for the customer. And I believe that's what won us the award.
Oh wow. Okay. And how? Just talk a little bit about our fiber initiatives. I think there's a city somewhere up in the valley. I don't know if it was Edinburgh or one of those smaller cities. They also announced that they were doing a fiber initiative. Are they also doing the same thing as far as going through the CARES Act for their funding?
I think that was Alamo, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Um, it's either FAR, and maybe it was FAR. Yeah, it might be the city of FAR. And I know I've met someone recently with them. They were talking about it, but as I understand it, that network is 100% city owned from start to finish. I don't
Mm,
think it's a public private partnership.
okay.
So it's a little bit different model as I understand it. But I am going to be following up with those folks to get more familiar with what they're doing, how it's working. Um, One of my big concerns when they talked about it was that I know a lot of the cities in the Upper Valley geographically are much smaller than Brownsville.
Right.
So to me, that makes it easier to be able to build and own your own network because you don't have as many miles you have to build out. Where Brownsville geographically is the largest city in the valley, so it's more of a challenge for us. But as I understand it, and I think it was FAR. FAR does have some outskirts on the northern end, getting going towards Edinburgh. So it is bigger than just a little boxed area that they had to build the network out in. But so far, the feedback I'm getting is very, very positive for how that's going.
Wow. Yeah. That's one of the things that I was curious how theirs was a little different from ours. I mean, obviously they're a smaller city, so
Yeah.
they don't have all the challenges that we do. One thing I know it's not part of the topic. What's your take? I've been trying to get the county judge to appear on my other show. I have another podcast show. It's a political show, but I haven't been able to solidify a date. But one of the things I'm going to invite him for is to talk about the arena. What's your take on the
Mhm.
arena? Should we be for it? Should we be against it? I mean, I know it lost by like 75 votes this past
55.
November.
55, I believe.
55. Okay.
But yes, I am 100% for the arena. I think it's when Hidalgo County's got two arenas and we don't have one yet, that's a problem. When I know I've been to events in the Upper Valley because that's where they're being held because there isn't a venue for one down here, that's a problem. Um, the only thing I would say is one, we need to realize that yeah, it is the hot tax, the hotel occupancy tax that funds this. It's nothing that's on your property tax bill that's going to fund this. So it's the revenues that that venue will generate, advertising revenues, and hot tax monies that will fund this, and that's paid for through the hotel occupancy tax, which is paid by tourists to the area. So I think we're in good shape there. Just like the amphitheater at Isla Blanca Park was built, and the new I forget what they built recently and just opened out in the Laguna Vista area. But those are all paid for with hot tax monies. And now that they've built those and opened those, this is just about redirecting the money now to our next project. It's not new money that we're going to try and collect. It's just authorizing the county to spend the money that's already being collected in this way.
Okay. Yeah.
But
Now.
we also need to make sure whatever we build, it needs to be bigger than anything that's already existing in Hidalgo.
Yeah.
We don't want to be a competitor. We don't want to be smaller. We need to build something with at least 1,000 to 2,000 more seats than whatever the largest arena is up there.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that I was arguing during the initial run up to the election with several friends of mine was that, if we're going to spend $100 million or whatever it is, or, I mean, not that we're going to spend it, right, because it's coming out of the hot tax, but if the money's going to be spent, it needs to at least have a larger capacity than what's out there today.
Yes.
It is a shame that for a lot of our high school graduations, and I don't know if you graduate from a public school in Brownsville?
I did. Leave that out, class of 92.
Did you? Yeah, I graduated in '89, so I'm a little older than you are. But you experienced that. I experienced it, having a graduation in the middle of June and having all your relatives out there in the heat. I mean, it is crazy, And
no, ours was actually in our gymnasium. Our class was only, I think we were about 330 students.
Oh, wow.
So our graduation was in the gymnasium at Iveta.
Wow, you were lucky.
On both sides of the gym floor and the graduates on the floor itself, so it worked out well.
Wow, well, mine was a class of 800 because I went to Porter.
Okay.
And
yeah, you needed to be in the stadium.
Yeah, but it was so hot, and my daughter's actually graduating this June, so I'm going to experience it one more time. But a lot of places, I mean, there's no place to hold graduations. I mean, even for TSC and the old UTRGV or UTRGV, they have them outside. I think recently they started having them over at the Harlingen Convention Center, but I'm thinking to myself, why should our Brownsville schools do that? Why should we have to go to another city?
Yep.
It makes no sense.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, and with regards to the hot tax, isn't that also being used to fund the hotel there on Morrison?
Or no, well, see, and that's another big misconception out there. That is the city of Brownsville hotel occupancy tax that's been committed for that project. This that we're talking about for the amphitheater is Cameron County hotel occupancy tax. Okay. I know I had some nonprofit organizations that I spoke to after the defeat of the initiative the first time. And when I talked to them about why they were against it, they said, well, we were worried that was going to cut into our funding. But their funding is coming from city of Brownsville hot tax monies, not from Cameron County. Those are two completely separate pools.
Okay. All right. Because I know there was some chatter around town about the fact that, why were we doing what we were doing with the hot tax for the hotel? But one of the things that I mentioned, and it was a little different in Harlingen's case with the same hotel chain that built theirs on their convention center. I think they did it with bonds, and then somebody tried to educate me online what a bond was, and I said I don't need to be taught what a bond is. They were talking about a construction bond. I said we're not talking about construction bonds because my argument was the city of Harlingen took out bonds to fund that hotel. And the person online was arguing with me. So they sent me a Webster's definition of a construction bond. I said, no, I'm not talking about a construction bond. I'm talking about a municipal bond. You buy those in increments of 10,000. And at the end of a certain term, 10 years or 15 years, they mature. And it's the public entity's responsibility to pay on that bond plus interest, Yep. So they were arguing about construction bonds. I said, no, it has nothing to do with that, But ours was different. We're basically returning the hot tax that we would normally collect and keep for the city, right? But it's up to $4 million.
Yeah, that we were forego collecting those taxes, but the hotelier is still responsible for spending those in accordance with how hot taxes are allowed to be spent. So it basically would still be going towards marketing and advertising, promoting the hotel and tourism industry in Brownsville, and their property would likely be featured in it, but it's still about generating more revenue for Brownsville. Because even with the hot tax money going to that, or us foregoing that, one, it's a property that does not exist today. So we're not collecting those dollars now. Two, we know that our hotels are usually running very high occupancy. So there is a demand out there. This will allow us to capture more of that demand. And while we're going to forego the hot tax monies for a certain period of time to help get this project off the ground, we're still collecting sales taxes on that. So those are revenues that will still come into city coffers. And the bigger thing is this will be a full service hotel.
Okay.
We should be able to attract different types of events now or conferences. While they won't be huge, it's something that we can house now at one property. And again, those are additional dollars coming to our city where they're going to stay in our hotels, eat in our restaurants, shop in our stores, or while the convention goers are in session, the spouses will go out on different uh, excursions throughout the city, hopefully to the Midi Culture District, maybe out to SpaceX. But again, it's more tourism and it's more dollars being spent, which generates sales tax revenue impact for the city.
Could you? And I know we did not plan to talk about this, but what could you give us some plans? What are the ultimate? What is the ultimate view of that MIDI cultural district? I know they're doing construction right now at the cannery. Explain to us
Yes.
that entire project. What is the final product going to look like?
So there in that section, the final product idea is what will be called the Buena Vida Arts and Cultural Park. Buena Vida is a nod to the neighborhood there locally, the Buena Vida neighborhood and the people of that area, and wanting to bring them into the district more as far as being interactive and participating and partaking of the amenities and the offerings that are in the district. So in that area, there will be art sculptures, water features, shaded areas, some covered areas, which will be an expansion of what the cannery is doing with the farmers market. So there'll be more space for vendors in
Okay.
covered areas on the park side of the development. There will be a large meadow with a stage for performances or concerts, outdoor bathrooms, because that's something that we're sorely lacking right now where the farmers market is at Linear Park.
Yeah.
And on I guess that's the east side of the block, there's a big warehouse that used to sell appliances. And that property is on reserve right now for the Children's Museum as part of an expansion for the future.
The yellow
And they're
building.
working with a development firm right now, and they're conducting focus groups for the ideas, and they're looking at what the master plan will be for their current location and connecting it to the Ringgold Civic Pavilion, which has recently been brought under their umbrella. And then there will also be the development of that big warehouse by the expressway. There, the idea is a space and science center focused children's museum, gearing towards kids that are slightly older than what they cater to at the current facility.
Yeah.
And this will all be part of a master plan, and there will be a capital funding campaign that is launched to raise the monies that will be needed to fund this. But the MIDI Foundation owns that property right now and has it on reserve for the Children's Museum of Brownsville if those plans come to fruition.
Yeah, because my wife and I were driving, I think last week, and
Mm-hmm.
we went through it and we were admiring the fact that there was construction, and then we see this yellow warehouse, and I'm telling my wife, why did they get rid of that thing? But now you're telling me that it's going to be now it's going to be like some science center, so that would be a good thing. I wish you guys
Well,
would
and
have
I'm
gotten rid
sure
of
the
Pinkerton's
warehouse will
Memorial.
eventually go the structure. I know the foundation will probably be used and maybe expanded,
Yeah.
but right now it is being used for storage as things are developing in that area.
Yeah,
So
I wish you guys
it
would have
is a
gotten rid of
functional
Pinkerton
warehouse right
Memorial
now.
though. The Pinkerton Memorial across the street, that's an eyesore.
Yeah, but
Could
it's hard to get them to relocate when their customers are right across the street from them,
Well, I
right across
know,
I
I know.
69.
Yeah. Well, let's see. What time do we have? Man, we went a full hour.
Yep.
I apologize for including extra topics, but I
No,
felt that.
I'm always good with new topics on the fly. Never shy away from that with me.
Yeah, yeah. No, we definitely appreciate you coming on. I mean, it gives us some additional detail with regards to some of the technology initiatives out there. As how it relates to how it's going to affect our citizens and so forth. I mean, like I said, any improvement in internet access is a plus. Hopefully we'll never have a pandemic and a majority of our citizens have to go back and isolate again. But
Yeah, no
hopefully, if
kidding.
that ever happens down the road, we've got a better connected community and environment. So
Yeah, hopefully no pandemic, hopefully no more winter storms, but let's be prepared just in case.
yeah. Alrighty, Mr. De Los Santos, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate everybody that chimed in and asked questions. And for anybody that missed it, we're on YouTube and we are on Facebook Live. We don't know what next week's show will bring, but if it's something we can bring Mr. De Los Santos back, we will be more than happy to have him back. Alrighty, everybody have a good night, and we'll see you next week. Mr. D, can you wait
Thank
a
you
few
all.
minutes? Can you wait a few minutes after I shut the
Sure.
cameras? Alrighty.
Absolutely.